Deacon.
Yeah, I'm calling on behalf of Nettie.
What's the problem?
You sent Nettie a note. On that note is a symbol. I've seen the symbol somewhere else.
Which symbol are we talking about here?
The time is at hand!
Holy shit. There's a word. A name written next to it. Morteth.
Wanna come play with me, Shadowman?
It all depends on what the game is. Ugly.
The rules are very simple. You either surrender to me here and now in the dark glory of my recreant vault, or you die.
And where else did you see this symbol?
On the guy's head.
Is this guy dead?
Johnny, are you okay?
Come see.
Mike, get away from him!
What the hell's happening here?
And behold the pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was dead,
Protect
and
the
hell
space
followed
and
with them.
burn the cabal of the Esprit that rises! Be gone!
Nettie's managed to keep him alive, but she says there are powers at work here that she don't understand. Holy shit!
Ты думал, что убив моего родненького Григори, сможешь спасти свою поганую шкуру?
I don't know what you're saying, but it doesn't sound good.
Я получу наслаждение твоей death!
I understood that well enough.
The darkness is you.
I'm well aware of that fact.
Notice how the cold, dank bleakness of the grave unfurls
You
within.
ain't listening to a word I say.
Its grey fingers curling around the soft, warm thrum of your beating heart.
That's the trouble with you people.
Death comes quick.
You never listen, which is why I'm gonna have to make you listen up, asshole. It's not entirely voodoo, were her exact words.
Do you know who put the symbol on the guy's head?
Boker, name of Morte, his thugs did it. Johnny? What the?
Hey! Welcome home, honey.
What is this shit?
This shit's the beginning of the end. You've seen the sign in the sky. It's a message, Shadow Man. A message from the Boker. Papa Morty. Babylon's gonna fall and you're falling with it.
Go to the cemetery on Lafayette Street, the Cimetière Clemel. Make sure you aren't followed. Go into the cemetery and take your place among the angels.
I guess I'm looking for some angels so I can take my place among them. Like the man said, that's it. My place is among the angels.
You're the guy I spoke to on the phone, Nettie's walker between the worlds.
That's me. You're Thomas Deacon. So, Thomas, how'd you get to be so vertically challenged?
How did I lose my legs? I got thrown against the wall by a demon called Samael.
Over there, Deacon. The Codex.
Got it.
What the?
Gabe!
Oh, Jesus!
The time has come, my little friends, to pay the price for your betrayal.
Gabe!
Nice try, little man. But not nice enough.
Come to me, you son of a bitch! Shit!
So it ends, Thomas. And soon in the skies the star will brightly shine.
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want.
Oh yeah, cause you're the guy with a demon obsession.
The correct term is Grigori Sephiroth. Your friend, the one with Morteth's symbol on his head. How's he doing?
He's doing okay, but he ain't my friend exactly.
Nettie's one smart mambo. She'll make things right. But it won't be easy. There are forces at work here that are far greater than mere Loa. The star Wormwood is ascendant, and now Morte, or should I say Morteth, can show his true face.
You think this Morte guy's a demon?
I don't think, I know. Morteth is Grigori Sephiroth. The mark on your friend's head is his mark, one of the 7 signs of evil that herald the Armageddon.
Do not trust the creature that calls itself Deacon. Think on that, Shadow Man.
Morteth and his friends, there are 7 Grigori in all, have been waiting for the star, waiting for that signal, waiting for the day when they can release their leader, Asmodeus, from the pit.
You haven't got any time at all.
Says who? Skinny?
Says me.
Well, I don't know who the hell you think you are, Cadaver Man, to be telling me how much time I got left. In case you hadn't realized, Corpse Boy, you in my hood. and I don't take too kindly to some jumped-up worm feast swaggering around spouting bullshit and acting like it owns the place. I am the Lord of Deadside, so move over, skinny, cause this lord's coming through.
Thousands of years ago, these sigils were given out to each of the 7 Grigori Sephiroth by their leader, Asmodeus. The Grigori Morteth, or Morte as you know it, will definitely have its own collection. If you need proof that what I'm telling you is true, then find a way into Morteth's lair and bring one of the sigils back here to me.
You ain't coming with me?
Morte is a Bakor with very powerful voodoo. He's involved in all kinds of bad stuff. Drugs, prostitution, you name it. He operates out of the old plantation past Lake Terre Noire. I've been feuding with this guy for longer than I care to remember, but we've had a kind of truce for the past few years. Seems like the truce is over.
Well, I reckon I need to go bust a cap in this guy's ass.
You're right, we do. I suggest that you go rescue Jaunty and get back your gun and your dad's watch. As far as the tools for the job are concerned, I can only offer you this.
A machete? Okay. I suppose it'll have to do till I get my gun back. Game over, you ugly son of a bitch. Messy.
Come and see.
By the first power of the serpent that crawls on its belly in the dust, I call on you, great Morteth Grigori Sephiroth, to open the way.
Shadowman was a massive hit for Acclaim Studios back in 1999 and really shook the gaming world to its core by creating a video game based off of a comic book series that stunned everyone with its extremely dark tones, terrific script, large open areas and gameplay which utilised and combined elements of Tomb Raider, Zelda and Metroid, and thus created a new protagonist, the Shadowman, which is still being talked about 22 years after the fact in websites, forums, group chats and even YouTube videos. So with the news of a Shadowman remaster, which sets to include improvements in sound textures and gameplay, it seems the legacy of this incredible game is being kept alive with fans still wanting some more of Michael Leroy. However, it might surprise you to know that in 2002 Acclaim released a sequel, Shadowman Second Coming, which was to be the last game they would ever develop, as the company shortly folded soon after. I don't think many people were aware of the sequel at the time, as this game was only ever available for the PlayStation 2 and not available for any other consoles. I think again that this decision was greatly influenced by Acclaim effectively going out of business, and perhaps they wanted a final last hurrah and to focus solely on a PlayStation 2 release. I mean, I myself only found out about the second game by chance in 2003 and bought it on the strength of really enjoying the first one. At the time though, I didn't devote as much time to it as I would have liked, but thought it looked pretty cool despite only doing a few of the game's tasks. Now we all know how huge Shadowman was, with it receiving multiple releases across various consoles, which I believe were the PC, N64, Dreamcast and of course the PlayStation 1. I cannot talk about just how massive this game was. Despite mixed opinions, some Videogame Magazine reviews of this first adventure went through the roof. It achieved something very special by capturing gamers with its dark, unsettling gameplay, isolation and horrific tones. This second adventure, however, seemed to come out of nowhere with extraordinarily little fanfare and marketing, and really tried to spice up the tried and tested formula of the first game by adding in elements such as a much more open and varied world, more characters to interact with, and much more of a strategic playstyle, with the player having to switch constantly between Mike and his alter ego, the Shadowman, to solve puzzles and collect weapons and items. So having finished the original Shadowman on PC and reading how this next game offered up a ton of new elements, weapons and storylines, I was of course hungry and excited for more. Just like the first game, which was pretty much well received by reviewers, this second foray into the world of Shadowman has its fans, and many say it's an engrossing and well made game, whilst others feel it's nothing more than average. Metacritic scored this game 68% out of 100, which is just above average. G4TC gave it 80%, stating that the game's dark occult storyline will really resonate with fans of horror in general, and IGN gave it 77%, believing that despite its flaws the game is still just as engrossing as the first and just as dark as ever. GameSpy however didn't feel this way and awarded the game 65%, saying that graphically it was pleasing to the eye but lacked some depth in the gameplay department. Computer and Videogames Magazine gave the game 8 out of 10, whilst the official PlayStation Magazine in the US gave the game 2 stars out of 5.
Quite the feckin' comedian, aren't we?
So with opinion being somewhat mixed and divided, it's time to place this game under my microscope and see whether this game really is as good as the original, if it's just underrated, a hidden gem, or if it should be avoided. Before I start, if you haven't seen my look into Shadowman and know nothing about the video game, then feel free to check out my 2-part Shadowman review. I'll place links in this video description. This will not only provide you with the backstory on the characters, but also Shadowman himself, the gameplay style, and why the game was such a massive success. It might also help you to understand the differences between this second adventure and that game. However, I will provide you with a brief introduction here to bring you up to speed with what's happening. So, will this game satisfy my curiosity? Could it be an even bigger hit than its predecessor? And what new dark challenges await Shadowman? In order to answer these questions, it looks like I'll have to pop this into my PlayStation 2 to take a trip to Deadside and head back into the world of Shadowman. Video game story.
For many thousands of years, the Shadowmen have protected the world of the living against threats crossing over from the spiritual plane known as Deadside, the place where everyone goes without exception when they die. Michael Leroy is the current heir to the mysteries of this ancient lineage, bearer of the Mask of Shadows. When darkness falls, he becomes the walker between the worlds, immortal voodoo warrior, taker of souls, lord of Deadside. The Shadowman.
Michael Leroy is the Shadowman, an undead immortal voodoo warrior who can cross back and forth from Liveside, the world of the living, to Deadside, the land of the dead, thanks to a voodoo mask knitted permanently into his ribs by a priestess called Mama Nettie. Because of this affliction, he is in many ways a slave, unable to refuse Nettie's requests due to the power that she has over the mask. Whilst this might seem somewhat cruel, the purpose of this is to ensure that no evil beings from Deadside or Liveside cross over and do harm in either world, thus keeping a sense of order and balance between the two realms. By day, Michael Leroy is human and cannot use his shadow powers. However, once night falls, he becomes the Shadow Man when the mask glows, and this allows him to use powerful magical voodoo attacks and weaponry. It was through these means and by collecting 120 Dark Souls in the last adventure that he was able to overcome one of his deadliest foes ever, called Legion, a terrifying evil entity who tried to usher in apocalypse by using the souls of 5 serial killers to cross over to Liveside with a massive army of demons. Not only did he send Mama Nettie a prophetic Deadside dream heralding his intentions, but he also tricked her into ordering Shadowman to go and collect the Dark Souls across both worlds. At the same time, Legion also took the form of Luke, Shadowman's deceased younger brother, using this to manipulate him to carry out his wishes. Legion knew that he couldn't reap all the Dark Souls himself, and so he hoped that while Shadowman would take all the risks and collect the souls, Legion would simply be able to take them from him in a climactic final confrontation. However, after a massive battle, Shadowman was able to defeat Legion and stop the invasion from happening. Unfortunately, Shadowman was now trapped in Deadside, as his means of travelling to both Liveside and Deadside was achieved by using his younger brother's teddy bear. Before the fight, Legion once again pretended to be Luke and Shadowman handed over the bear. Legion then proclaimed that now he had the bear, that there was no way he could go back home. After being trapped in Deadside for a long time, Shadowman had accepted his fate that he may never return back to Liveside. However, the bear which allows Shadowman to travel back and forth has now mysteriously reappeared in this dark realm and will finally allow Shadowman to travel back to Liveside. However, once he gets his hands on the bear, However, all is not well. After returning to his hometown of Louisiana, Michael learns that a new threat has now inhabited both worlds, these being the Grigori. They are ancient demons who have lived among us for over 2,000 years, masquerading as humans, and are now planning to release their leader Asmodeus from another realm called Gehenna, which is something of a spiritual prison which holds this evil being indefinitely and also allows travel to different dead side and live side locations where each Grigori member resides. The only thing that can defeat the other Grigori and will also release Asmodeus is an ancient book called the Codex, which requires a number of small triangles called sigils to open.
Okay, Thomas Deacon, I got your sigil.
The monster you encountered was an abomination, one of many nightmare creatures that the Grigori brought with them when they fled from Gehenna many thousands of years ago during what is known as the Exodus.
Michael discovers that the World at Heart bar has been completely trashed, with occult symbols written all over the place. Not only that, but Jaunty, his Irish friend, who can also travel to Deadside, has also been kidnapped by one of the Grigori. So after a quick trip to Mama Nettie's church, Michael must once again use his powers as Shadowman to travel between both live and Deadside locations to stop the Grigori and its army, solve puzzles, gather items and weapons, and dish out some much needed voodoo justice to prevent Asmodeus from ever invading Liveside. This time players can not only visit Mama Nettie but also Thomas Deacon, who relays instructions from a hidden crypt in Louisiana. Gameplay. Shadowman Second Coming is a 3D platform puzzler game which puts the player into the shoes of Michael Leroy, aka the Shadowman, much like in the first game. Whilst both are the same person and control identically, aesthetically acclaimed studios have overhauled both forms to try and differentiate between the two. In Liveside during the day you play as Michael, who is now incredibly buff and possesses great strength. He can also take more damage than his alter ego and can also push large objects out the way very easily. However, in human form, Mike can't hold his breath for long underwater or use any of Shadowman's voodoo magic and will take damage from huge falls. As nightfall approaches, Michael then becomes Shadowman, who is very skinny and lacks Mike's strength. He can, however, use the same weapons Mike can as well as voodoo magic. Being dead, Shadowman can hold his breath infinitely underwater and will not take damage from large falls. During the live side sections, the timer will tick down and the player switches from Michael to Shadowman when nightfall approaches and vice versa, so the player must utilise the different strengths of both to solve puzzles and bypass tricky obstacles. With these changes, it definitely adds a depth of strategy, as early on you have to wait for the timer to transform back and forth between the two. Acclaim, it seems, also decided to switch the tone of the game. It is nowhere near as dark or disturbing as the first one was. In fact, it takes much more of a light-hearted feel. Whilst it still introduces horror elements such as the occult, demons and enemies, they are simply not a patch on its predecessors, which were downright disturbing, visceral and really got the adrenaline pumping. Gone are the asylum-style freaks with chainsaws, wailing tortured souls, and even the duppies don't really get much screen time. Everywhere you went in that game, it was dark, bloody, and really hammered home that feeling of isolation. And whilst some may argue that it was too much, you still had one hell of an experience that was unforgettable. That's not to say that this game doesn't have its moments, however they are very few and far between. I can only guess that maybe Acclaim actively chose to tone down this level of horror to try and cater to a wider age demographic, or perhaps this being Acclaim's last released game before the studio went bankrupt, they simply didn't have the time or funds to really do the game justice. Even the script is more jovial and light-hearted, with Shadowman cracking jokes, which I feel just goes away from the tortured character that was in many ways the main selling point of the original.
Whoa, ride him, cowboy.
Oh, very amusing, I'm sure.
Where'd you find him?
Would you believe hanging upside down from a maypole tree? Looks like voodoo, a Veve mark. I saw the same symbol on the walls at the Wild at Heart.
While Papa Morte may be voodoo, in league with the Loa Samedi, this mark isn't voodoo at all. I don't know what it is.
Johnny, are you okay?
Come see.
Mike, get away from him!
What the hell's happening here?
And behold the pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was death, and hell followed.
Mike and Nettie's exchanges are just not as good in Second Coming, mainly because although Red Pepper returned to voice Shadowman, Lainey Manelli, who did the voice of Nettie in the first game, didn't voice the role, and this new actress portraying her just does not sound right at all.
Hey, Nettie.
What's up, Mike?
You know, the usual. Getting stomped by a bunch of gangbangers.
A gang, you say?
Yeah, mother's trashed the wallet hard, stole my gun and my dad's watch. Oh, and Jaunty's missing.
Sounds like Papa Morte's crew.
Oh yeah?
Morte's a Bakor with very powerful voodoo. He's involved in all kinds of bad stuff.
Gone is the mysterious Caribbean cool and sexy voice and dialogue. Now, this really disappointed me as I really liked the first iteration of Nettie. Don't get me wrong, the story and script are very ambitious and it's clear that a level of detail went in to try and expand Shadowman's world, but for me, it just doesn't fit too well and sometimes comes across like I'm in a B-movie. Also expanded is Louisiana itself with more areas and tasks to achieve at the start, whereas in the last game you only ever got to visit Nettie's church, the surrounding swamps, caves and underwater sections. This time around you must visit more of the outback, defeat thugs, find and rescue Jaunty who is in his human form here, meet up with Nettie in her church and visit Thomas Deacon. Deacon is a character who has only ever been alluded to in Shadowman's previous adventure. He is a former police officer, now turned private eye, and demon hunter who was paralysed whilst he and his partner were escaping from a large demon 10 years before this adventure. His partner was killed, but Thomas managed to escape with the means of summoning the Grigori and Asmodeus, the Codex, which he has kept hidden.
Eddie's one smart mambo. She'll make things right. But it won't be easy. There are forces at work here that are far greater than mere law. The star Wormwood is ascendant, and now Morte, or should I say Morteth, can show his true face.
You think this Morte guy's a demon?
I don't think, I know. Morteth is Grigori Sephiroth. The mark on your friend's head is his mark, one of the 7 signs of evil that herald the Armageddon. Morteth and his friends, there are 7 Grigori in all, have been waiting for the star, waiting for that signal, waiting for the day when they can release their leader, Asmodeus, from the pit. We're talking the whole book of Revelation here, chapter and verse.
He has worked with Mama Nettie for many years, providing information to help stop threats from both worlds. Unfortunately, with the Grigori's human thugs closing in on Thomas's location, he must now entrust Shadowman with the knowledge that will stop the Grigori's evil plans to resurrect their master. So, essentially, the player must work their way through the game, alternating between live side, dead side and Guiana to solve puzzles, defeat evil demons, collect sigils and defeat each member of the Grigori. As before, you will have to visit Mama Nettie a few times to kickstart the story, and also Thomas Deacon, who has an underground crypt in Louisiana. This game's locations are all large like the last game, but solving the many puzzles can still be problematic, but it's a lot more straightforward this time round. The game does throw you a few hints when you come across a closed area that you need to get into, so it's in nowhere near as arduous or isolating as the last game, as now there is structure in many of the locations you need to visit. Although there are still times when it's not very clear what you have to do or where you need to go, I do recommend using a walkthrough and searching every area with a fine-tooth comb. Most of the time I got stuck because I hadn't hit a switch or pulled a lever, and because I was so used to jumping back and forth from light side to dead side in the first game, it does get very confusing when you reach Guiana. There are multiple routes, hidden sigils to find and also rooms that need to be unlocked, and it also acts as a hub to other live side locations. I was feeling a bit overwhelmed, but using a walkthrough really helped ease the confusion and I eventually figured it out. The sole purpose of the gameplay is to gather sigils from the various locations to open up certain pages in the Codex. This in turn allows Shadowman to summon the Grigori demon and open each live side location that they are in turn.
By the 4th power, power of the undead who roam the rank spaces beneath the earth, I call on you, great Ogre Pharrell, Grigori Sephiroth, to open the way.
You must visit each vault in Guiana, and provided you have the right amount of sigils, you can then use the Codex. Once this has been achieved, you will then need to visit each location and switch back and forth between Michael and Shadowman to collect more sigils, solve puzzles, find key weapons and items, and eventually fight a Grigori member. This time around there are no Dark Souls to collect, but just as in the last game, Shadowman can get his hands on a number of weapons, such as a shotgun, grenade launcher, pistol, rifle, machine gun, as well as hand-to-hand weapons such as blades, gauntlets, an axe, and a crowbar. Don't worry about running out of ammo or magic, as there are pots scattered everywhere containing refills for each, so you're very well catered for in that regard, and this takes a lot of the stress out of having an empty weapon. There is also the staggering amount of voodoo weapons that will help turn the tide in Shadowman's favour, such as fire-based weapons and projectiles which will seriously harm baddies and even help open up hidden walls revealing secrets. Also, unlike the last game, you can pretty much find and acquire weapons much easier this time round, which will please a lot of fans who perhaps felt the Metroid approach from the last game was a little too much. Also, there are no restrictions on what weapons you can use most of the time. Whilst I feel that this is a necessary step to try and fall in line with many games at the time, I do have my own thoughts on which I will discuss when I talk about the good and bad aspects of the game. Making a return from the last game are Cadeau. Collecting 10 of these will allow Shadowman to make an offering to the god Loa, who will extend his health or magic meter. Thankfully, this can now be done beneath Nettie's church. Finally are the important items that Shadowman must use to navigate his way through Liveside and Deadside. The teddy bear, as I mentioned earlier, makes a welcome return and is more than just a means of getting you to and from your destination. This time around, each location has checkpoints dotted around, meaning that if you reach one, then if you die you can walk back to that checkpoint instantly, and this also means you can save your progress and also switch off your console if you need to without worrying about having to do the whole stage again. Also, I did say that in the beginning that you will have to wait until the timer switches from day to night and vice versa to change from Mike to Shadowman. Now this can be annoying, especially when you just want to get through a little quicker. However, if you can persevere with this, then your patience will be rewarded when early on you find a pocket watch that belonged to Mike's deceased father. With this in your possession, you can control time and switch instantly from one to the other, which does make the game much easier. I did think this was a great addition to the game for the most part, which I will go into later on. Graphics. Well, if I'm honest, I don't rate them very highly as in other titles. Whilst they're not terrible, I do feel that the PlayStation 2 could have been better utilised, as Metal Gear Solid 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 was out a few years before and both looked marginally better than this game by comparison. A lot of the enemies and locations, although impressive at first glance, do tend to look a little generic. I do feel more effort could have gone into making them look a lot more detailed, and the enemies don't look as terrifying or menacing as in the first Shadowman. Even the Grigori bosses I feel just don't wow me. Please don't think I'm ripping on the game unfairly, it's just after seeing how much attention to detail went into the first Shadowman and then playing this, I guess I just expected more of the same. I will say that in contrast, there were some levels I really liked the look of. The Russian stage looked particularly impressive, and its boss Baba Yagov was an exception. I thought the cutscenes looked brilliant though, and Mike and Shadowman do look like they should.
Holy shit!
Ты думал, что убив моего родненького Григори, сможешь спасти свою поганую шкуру?
I don't know what you're saying, but it doesn't sound good.
Я получу наслаждение от твоих жертв.
I understood that well enough.
The changes to the character models I think was a nice choice and helped distinguish one from the other. Also, I really liked the Duppy village in Deadside. It's massive and having to try and work your way to the top was challenging, with the large staircases and blood waterfalls was cool. I guess I kind of wished more locations in the game were given this treatment. As cool as the Duppy village was, I really did enjoy the level set in Ireland. However, as great as that level was, I did encounter a glitch which would sometimes occur. Apparently it's quite common. Sometimes when moving through the level, the game struggles to load up the textures and you get absolutely no detail at all. You can still move through it fine, but it just looks weird. As I said, overall, graphically, it's a real shame because this game has some really great elements in it, and sometimes the graphics just don't fully reflect what I feel Acclaim were intending. It kind of relegates this game to looking like just another PlayStation 2 run-and-gun platform game. Perhaps the developers were in a rush to bring it out, this being the last game and all. I just feel like certain parts of the game look a little rough around the edges, slightly unpolished, and perhaps a bit more could have been done here to make more of a difference. Controls. Well, where do I begin? Shadowman controls pretty much as you did in the last game. You can jump, roll, fire weapons, climb up, pull levers, swim, and generally do what you could do last time, which is pretty cool. Also, you can now assign 4 weapons to Shadowman's left and right hands and toggle between each of them to select which ones you would like to use. You can switch back and forth, which took me a few minutes to get used to, but really took away having to constantly visit the menu screens to select new weapons and items. Whilst this is necessary, particularly in the last game, I did find it got a bit frustrating having to do this over and over again. Second Coming is much more refined because the player has a bit more freedom and you can pretty much get by with the same weapons. The menu has also been greatly expanded with items, standard weapons such as guns, strong voodoo weapons and Nephilim weapons which are extremely powerful. Michael can also pick up items which will allow him to solve puzzles and advance the plot. One thing I like about this game is it's so easy to find the right combination of firepower that will work for you. Because the controls remain the same, the veterans of the series will instantly be able to click right back in. Shadowman still can't jump very high and you have to time your jumps because he won't run and jump from the very edge. This means you must run and jump just before he gets to the edge as he will fall off. There were times when this was annoying, especially in the first game, and whilst I didn't find it a problem, in the first game there was a fundamental reason why it just doesn't work so well in this game. This being the decision for PlayStation 2 games to fully embrace the twin analog sticks. Now I will admit, I'm not a huge fan of using analog sticks in video games. I can get by in some games using them no problem, but just prefer the D-pad if I had the choice. I understand that analog sticks are pretty much more commonplace nowadays with gaming, and whilst I can get used to them, I do understand that there are gamers who prefer them and probably feel that the D-pads are outdated and uncomfortable. Shadowman Second Coming again fully embraces the analog sticks and does not support fans of the D-pad, so I couldn't use the D-pad even if I wanted to. Now I can get by in this game and use the sticks for the most part, but it's just that the control style of Shadowman here does not match the use of sticks when trying to make tricky jumps necessary for progression. I found it very hard to steer Shadowman as the sticks are way too sensitive, and this would see me falling down time and time again. I found this to be a real issue in Ireland. There's a part in the middle of the level where you have to navigate this huge tower by doing a series of running jumps. No matter how careful I was, I just kept slipping off and having to climb all the way back up again. No joke, it took me the best part of half an hour to do just what should have been a simple series of jumps. Or when having to walk on balancing beams, it just wasn't fun at all, and none of these parts felt like a necessary stepping stone to the next part of the level, but rather a painful, frustrating endurance. As I said, this problem was present in the first Shadowman game when using the sticks. Again, on the PC version I was able to use the D-pad, and that's why I only rated the controls as being somewhat of a minor annoyance in that game. Combat is not that bad however and controls pretty well, so I had no issues with that aspect of the controls, and even moving around generally is pretty good, but because of the freedom the analog sticks provide, I had real trouble lining Shadowman up to climb ladders, as often he would not walk in a straight line. I will say though that for some reason early on when in a combat situation, in some sections of Louisiana the game switches to a top-down view. This makes absolutely no sense as I can't control my character very well because I can't see what's shooting me and the camera is just not helpful at this point. I do not even remember seeing this top-down view anywhere else in the game, just in the first section, so I took a number of cheap hits. However, this frustration was lessened because Shadowman always respawns at the last checkpoint with the enemies you destroyed not returning this time and the damage you dealt still in effect. The same even occurs for the Grigori bosses. You can die and respawn right back into the same boss room, which I actually think is really cool. And although the controls might prove problematic at times, at least the game is very fair at putting you right back where you were. Sound and music. While the familiar Shadowman theme returns, it sounds a lot more grandiose and epic this time around. Acclaim has changed the tone of the instrumentation to reflect the game, which as I mentioned earlier is pretty less horrific and actually feels like a standard PlayStation 2 platformer. In fact, many of the tunes are much more action orientated, as most of the time I feel like I'm in a Schwarzenegger movie blasting continuous waves of baddies. To be fair though, the PlayStation 2 was jam-packed full of action style games, and so I can see why the developers decided to go in this direction. There are some somewhat mysterious tunes to be found. I did like Louisiana's laid back but also slightly mysterious music, and Russia was an especially standout track for me. It pains me to say this, but most of the score composed is somewhat forgettable. Don't get me wrong, they are serviceable, but they just failed to grip me this time round. I hate constantly having to make comparisons to the first game, but I miss the live and let die atmospheric tunes and sound cues, as well as the playroom sounds in the asylum and the themes in Deadside. The sound effects are however really good. We get some recycled sounds in the first game, and this is no bad thing as it helps to re-engage with the Shadowman character. There's also the familiar sound of the almighty shadow gun, which you can charge up to full effect here, as well as melee weapons which give a huge crunch when used on enemies, and the sounds of gunfire and voodoo weaponry are all very pleasing to the ear, which is a good thing because baddies come at you pretty thick and fast here, and despite not looking as fierce, they do sound great to me. Okay, as always it's time to look at the final boss and video game ending. This next part will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to know what happens then please skip ahead to the next section. I will give you some time to do this.
I need ammo.
Video game ending. Okay, so this is where things get really confusing. I will be honest right from the start by saying I got really stumped at this point. Now, from the start of the game, Shadowman will need to interact with Mama Nettie and Thomas Deacon, who provides information on the Grigori and the sigils you need to collect. Unfortunately, this is where some of my confusion comes from. I will try and be as clear as possible here, as it can get really complicated. Alright, I'll start off. Here we go. You see, you only really interact with both Nettie and Thomas a few times, and then you are pretty much left to your own devices. Whilst Nettie gives Mike a few live side tasks to achieve, she doesn't provide much information on what to do or where to go. The only major role she plays is to lift a curse which has been placed on Jaunty, and this can only be achieved once Shadowman has found a special chalice.
Nettie, I've got the chalice.
Jaunty's slipping fast. Hold him down and brace yourself. Hold him!
That's what I'm doing! Jesus! Nettie, look out!
Oh, Christ, I've got the mother of all headaches.
Oh.
I can feel a drip to dead side coming on.
After that, she no longer says or does anything, and it's kind of the same with Thomas Deacon. I will explain more about this in the next section as I don't want to go off on a tangent. Now, I did indeed collect all 32 sigils. I used the codex and summoned Asmodeus. I was all ready to fight him when a winged angel suddenly flew in and tells Shadowman that it's not his fight and proceeds to take on Asmodeus himself.
Welcome, Mikhail.
Asmodeus.
It's my destiny too.
Quite a welcoming party.
Step aside, Mikhail. This is my battle now.
His true name is Diaketh. He is a Grigori Malakim, a demon by any other name, formerly one of my foot soldiers. Before his treachery, a treachery that extends for millennia. The time really is at hand, Diaketh. Behold it! So be it!
Now, the problem with this is it comes entirely out of nowhere. I assume that maybe the angel is Thomas Deacon, whom Shadowman met earlier, which makes no sense whatsoever. The reason I say this is because you only meet Deacon a few times, and the last time you meet him, he tells you that he will be in touch.
The Grigori want the Codex back, hence the visit by Morteth's thugs, in order to open the way to Gehenna, the place beyond worlds, wherein lies the entrance to the pit. You must stand before the Gregoria statue in the Recreant Vault and read aloud this page of ancient text known as the Litany. The Grigori plan to use the Codex to release Asmodeus from the pit, and then they'll all once again be united with their demon lord and will bring about Armageddon, as prophesied in the Book of Revelation. To release Asmodeus, all seals on the Codex must be opened. However, since we have the Codex in our possession, we can use it to open the pit ourselves and destroy Asmodeus forever.
But if the Grigori know you're here, they're gonna come after you again. And if they do, they may have more success and take back the Codex.
Correct. Which is why, Shadowman, I entrust the Codex to you. There are many places where I can hide out. I'll be in touch when I know it's safe to do so. In the meantime...
Now this led me to think that maybe okay, so I'll probably meet him later on in the game at a different location. Well, after the last meeting you have with him, you never see or hear anything from him again. He just disappears. I even tried going back to his locations, but alas, he had gone. So you can see my confusion. At the end of the game, this angel shows up and tries to defeat the big Grigori boss, but gets flattened. It looks like Deacon, but there's no reference to the fact that it's him. All Asmodeus says is that this angel used to be one of his soldiers, so you can see why I'm really puzzled here. It would have been nice to know if this is indeed Deacon, or have met this angel earlier in the game to build up the story. Anyway, you go on to fight Asmodeus, who is this huge four-legged demon. You need to blast him, but this is made all the more difficult as he lunges towards the ceiling and releases little creatures that need to be destroyed before he comes down again to attack you. He uses a few blaster attacks, some of which are quick shots, and one which is extremely dangerous and can wipe old Shadowman out almost instantly. I will go on record to say that Asmodeus is even easier than Legion was in the first game. I wish there was more to say about this battle, but all you do is you just try and move out of his way. When he decides to use those dangerous projectiles, then use the teddy bear checkpoint when you die.
It's payback time, you asshole.
Surely we can talk about this.
This is for Deacon.
Obviously not.
And this is for me. I am the Lord of Deadside.
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the void, and his angels were cast out.
This means that should you die, you can just choose to respawn in the boss room and carry on plugging away. You may die more than a few times, but you will get him eventually. After much blasting, finally Asmodeus is defeated and Shadowman finishes him off in style. Now if I'm honest, the ending is nothing really anything to write home about, as Shadowman does his Lord of Deadside speech and the angel character just prophesies about the demon being cast out. Again, no Mama Nettie or Jaunty this time, and this makes no sense whatsoever. Then after a lengthy credit screen, it's back to the start. Now, to say I was underwhelmed would be an understatement. I just felt that the plot made no sense in the end and something was lost in translation. Okay, so here's where I feel Shadowman's Second Coming really dropped the ball with his plot. Now again, the idea of demons wanting to resurrect their master Asmodeus was cool, and I can see what Acclaim were going for, and in the beginning it does kind of work well. The idea of doing a few tasks for Nettie was a nice touch, as you get to see more of Louisiana and their relationship. Again, she becomes pretty much redundant after a few tasks, and you don't really need to see her again until you get the chalice later on. Now here's my problem with the Thomas Deacon character. You first meet him in his crypt, where he informs you that you need to go and retrieve a sigil from the first Grigori Papa Morte character. No problem, right? So I headed off to the Louisiana plantation, solved the puzzles and finally met up with Morte. Well, before the fight, Morte told Shadowman that he needs to watch out for Thomas Deacon, which led me to believe that Deacon only wants to use Shadowman to open the gate and potentially double cross him.
Wanna come play with me, Shadowman?
It all depends on what the game is, ugly.
The rules are very simple. You either surrender to me here and now in the dark glory of my recreant vault, or you die.
I don't think much of them rules. I'll make my own rules up if you don't mind.
Don't think you can scare me with your Nephilim toys. The star wormwood is in ascension.
So everyone keeps telling me.
The time is at hand.
I ain't afraid of you.
Well,
you should be. And before you die, think on this.
Do not trust the creature that calls itself Deacon. Think on that, Shadowman.
Okay, I thought about it. What now?
Now, Shadowman. And without further ado, you die.
Now, Shadowman just dismisses the speech and destroys Papa Morte, and you then take the sigil back to Deacon. Soon after, Shadowman arrives, there's a pile of corpses which Deacon says were Grigori thugs trying to get their hands on the codex, so I assume Deacon took care of them. He then says it's too dangerous for him there and he will be in touch. He doesn't appear again. And I could only think at this point that maybe what Papa Morte said was true. I was fully expecting Deacon to betray Shadowman at the end of the game, however this does not happen. So my question is, why would Morte say this? Now if they were going for a bad guy trying to stir things up, then that's fine, but Papa Morte was pretty serious when he said it. Then at the end, this angel appears who again resembles Deacon. He just shows up out of nowhere and tries to fight Asmodeus, and there's absolutely no build up or anything. If it is Deacon, that's fine, but no one actually says that it's him, and then we are told that he's a former member of Asmodeus' army of demons. I'm sorry to bang on about this plot point, but it just does not make sense, as we don't see Deacon die, or see him again after he buggers off. From research I've conducted, my theory is that Acclaim had something much bigger in mind storyline wise. I mean, there's so much effort that's gone into the story in the beginning and even in the instruction manual, and it really makes you think that you are going to get a much more involved game. I think that because again this was Acclaim's last game, there was a rush to get it out, and so perhaps the plot had to be changed last minute to get out on time. It's a real shame because had they gone with the betrayal involving Deacon, then this would have been far more appealing and would have bumped the Impressive story up even more. So, can I recommend Shadowman Second Coming? Well, that's a tough one. In all fairness, it's not that it's unplayable or wholly bad, I just feel that it falls very short of the first game, which really knocked it out the park, and in my eyes created something masterful, fusing the popular gaming genres at the time and sprinkling in lots of blood and mystery and horror. Anyone expecting more of that will be bitterly disappointed, as this game follows a much more light-hearted comical affair, and it just doesn't fit the nature of Shadowman or his universe. I mean, Jaunty gets much more screen time in his human form this time around, and his lines are just as funny as ever. However, it seems that Acclaim wanted Shadowman to joke around too, but again this just doesn't work.
And his name that sat upon him was Death. And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death. And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death. Oh no, don't hit me again, you bad, bad men. Please don't hit me again. I'll be good. I'll tell you anything you want. The President's a moron. The Queen of England's got genital warts. My mother was a donkey-loving strumpet.
Johnny, it's me.
What? Oh, Michael, it's you. Am I glad to see your happy, smiling mug?
Keep your goddamn voice down.
What?
Your voice. Keep it down. This place is crawling with Morte's thugs.
Oh, right.
You been playing with Nettie's makeup again?
Huh? Oh, the symbol on me noggin? Yeah, well, I don't know much about it except that it itches like bloody hell. Now, what about getting me down from here, you wee gouger? Oi, be careful with that thing. You'll have me eye out with it, so you will.
I'll do more than cut your eye out if you don't shut the hell up.
You will catch me, won't you, Michael?
Whoops. Missed.
You bloody idiot. I think I've broken me skull. Me brains are sure to be pouring out all over the place any minute.
What brains?
Oh, very funny, very bloody funny, I'm sure.
Okay, we're gonna get out of here, but you gotta keep low. We shouldn't be too difficult for you.
Oh, quite the feckin' comedian, aren't we? Ah, me leg! It's me leg, Michael!
Jesus!
No, me leg! It's me leg, Michael! I don't think I can walk on it. I think you're going to have to carry me.
Climb up on my shoulders.
Ah, away with you. Leave me here. I'm sure I'll be alright. I'm sure that the bad, bad men won't tear me limb from limb and feed me my tongue for supper.
Don't tempt me, Johnny. Get on my shoulders.
Oh, alright then, if you insist. Home, James. Don't spare the horse.
It pains me to say this, but Shadowman Second Coming falls more in line as an above average PlayStation 2 platform game. I understand again why the developers went down this route, as the PS2 was still picking up steam and it did make sense, but the game suffers greatly because of this decision. The original worked so well because it was its own thing. In many ways there are elements of the original here, but they are very few and far between, and I didn't get that sense of dread as I did with the first game. Also, they give you items way too easily here, and the significance of the items are just not really explained. For example, very early on, Nettie throws out a line about Mike having to go and find his father's pocket watch. There's no explanation about how it means something to Mike and why he needs it. I get that it's needed to control time to help switch Mike and Shadowman back and forth. You're shown right at the start of the game that you have to wait for night time to turn into Shadowman and daytime for Mike. This is made pretty clear and explained thoroughly. Then for the developers to pretty much give you the watch after only a few hours for me ruins how important the watch is. It's kind of like L'Eclipser, which was the knife in the first game. Nettie told Mike that he needed 3 pieces of a blade in order to bring the Shadowman into the world of men. You really have to work so hard to get the 3 pieces of the knife, and it's not given right away. It took me a few days to gather all 3 parts. I guess I'm trying to say that I felt like I earned it. Shadowman's Second Coming is a little too generous, and whilst I can see that might be people's preferred choice, I really didn't feel like I worked hard for any of the items and were just given them regardless. I also feel that the storyline has so much more to offer, especially in the beginning, and just goes awry pretty soon after the first few hours. It pains me to say it, but it lacks the polished and solid foundations of the original. It tried to go in another direction, and this doesn't work solely for the reasons I've stated. However, Shadowman's Second Coming does shine in its ability to be a good PlayStation 2 platformer. Despite my issues with this game, I did still have fun and do believe that's where most of the enjoyment came from. The first game had such big shoes to fill, and in my mind still does. Shadowman's Second Coming just doesn't do the job, but will provide some light-hearted entertainment and gameplay that will at least satisfy the hardened platform veterans for a while.